The sound of breaking glass echoed through the marble lobby of Meridian Financial Group. At exactly 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday evening that would change everything, Maria Elena Rodriguez stood frozen in the center of the pristine hallway, staring down at the shattered remains of what had been an expensive crystal award. The jagged pieces reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, like accusations scattered across the polished floor. Her hands trembled as she gripped the handle of her cleaning cart, knuckles white against brown skin that bore the calluses of a lifetime of honest work. "Great," she whispered to herself in Spanish, then immediately caught herself. They were always listening here, always watching, always waiting for her to slip up and prove their assumptions right. This wasn't how she'd imagined her first day would begin. But then again, nothing about the last 6 months had gone according to plan. Let me take you back to the beginning of this day, because every detail matters. Every moment of humiliation, every cruel word, every dismissive glance, it all led to what would happen next. Maria had arrived at Meridian Financial Group at 5:30 p.m. sharp, 30 minutes before her official start time. She'd learned long ago that being early was the only way to show respect in a world that seemed determined to show her none. The building towered above her like a glass and steel monument to success. The kind of success that people like her were supposed to clean up after, not achieve for themselves. She wore the standard issue uniform that the cleaning company had provided, a gray polyester shirt that had seen better days, matching pants that were a size too big, and black sneakers that she'd reinforced with duct tape after the sole had started separating last month. The tape was barely visible, but she knew it was there. In a place like this, everything was noticed and judged. Her reflection in the building's glass doors showed a woman who looked older than her 52 years. The stress of the past months had carved new lines around her dark eyes, and her black hair, streaked with premature silver, was pulled back in a practical ponytail that had been her hairstyle for as long as she could remember. She looked exactly like what they expected to see, just another invisible woman in a gray uniform, someone whose story didn't matter. If only they knew. The security guard, a heavy-set man in his 60s named Bill, barely looked up from his newspaper as she approached the desk. "You the new cleaning lady?" "Yes, sir. Maria Rodriguez. I'm with Executive Cleaning Services." He slid a visitor's badge across the counter without making eye contact. "6th floor and up. Don't touch anything you don't need to touch. Building empties out around 6, but some of the hotshots work late. Stay out of their way." Maria clipped the badge to her shirt and headed for the service elevator. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection again in the polished metal and felt the familiar weight of the choice she'd made. 3 months. She just had to last 3 months, and then everything would change. The 6th floor of Meridian Financial Group was a monument to corporate ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city skyline, while inside, the space was divided between an open floor plan filled with expensive desks and glass-walled offices for the executives. Everything was designed to impress, from the imported Italian marble in the lobby to the original artwork that probably cost more than most people made in a year. But Maria wasn't here to admire the decor. She pushed her cart out of the elevator and immediately felt the shift in energy. The building wasn't empty yet. She could hear voices, laughter, the clicking of keyboards. The workday was winding down, but for her, it was just beginning. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, commanding, with the kind of authority that came from never being told no. Maria turned to see a blonde woman in her early 30s approaching, her designer suit perfectly tailored, her makeup flawless despite the late hour. Everything about her screamed expensive, from her manicured nails to her Louis Vuitton handbag. "Yes, ma'am." The woman looked Maria up and down with the kind of clinical assessment usually reserved for livestock. "You're the new cleaning person?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm Maria Rodriguez. I'll be working the evening shift from now on. I'm Jennifer Walsh, Senior Vice President of Client Relations." She said her title like it should mean something to Maria, like she should be impressed. "I need to make something very clear from the beginning. This floor handles extremely sensitive financial information. You are not to touch anything on the desks, not papers, not computers, not personal items. You empty the trash, you dust the surfaces, and you move on. Is that understood? Maria nodded. Of course, ma'am. I understand completely. Jennifer's smile was cold. Good, and please try to be discreet. Our clients expect a certain level of professionalism. Even from the cleaning staff, the dismissal was clear. Jennifer turned on her expensive heels and walked away, leaving Maria standing alone with her cart and her burning cheeks. But this was just the beginning. As Maria began her rounds, she became acutely aware of the conversations happening around her. It was as if her uniform made her invisible. Or perhaps they simply didn't care if she heard them. Did you see her shoes? The voice belonged to a young woman with perfectly straightened hair and a dress that probably cost more than Maria's monthly rent. She was talking to a colleague by the water cooler, her voice carrying across the open office space. What about them? Her friend asked, glancing over at Maria. They're held together with duct tape. Duct tape, I know she's just the cleaning lady, but come on. They both laughed, the kind of casual, thoughtless laughter that cuts deeper than intended cruelty because it's so effortless. Maria's hands tightened on the handle of her vacuum, but she kept working. She'd heard worse, much worse. The key was to stay invisible, to do her job, and to remember why she was here. The photo in her cart helped. It was tucked into a small side pocket, protected by a plastic sleeve that had seen better days. The picture showed a young woman in a cap and gown, beaming with pride on her college graduation day. Sofia Rodriguez, her daughter, her heart, her reason for everything. Sofia was 23 now, brilliant and determined, just 3 months away from finishing her law degree at the state university, 3 months away from becoming the first person in their family to graduate from professional school, 3 months away from a future that would be everything Maria's life hadn't been. But law school was expensive. Even with scholarships and student loans, there were still costs, books, living expenses, bar exam fees. Maria's regular job at the insurance office covered their basic needs, but barely. When Sofia had called 3 months ago, panicked about a shortfall in her final semester's funding, Maria had known what she had to do. She'd found the evening cleaning job the next day. Mom, I can defer for a semester, Sofia had said, her voice thick with disappointment during their phone call. Maybe I can find more work. Save up some money. Absolutely not, Maria had replied, her voice firm despite the fear in her chest. You're so close, Mija. We'll figure it out. And they had. This job paid well enough to cover the gap, and the hours worked around her day job. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and Maria had never been ashamed of honest work. Until now. Excuse me. A man's voice, loud and impatient, cut through her thoughts. Maria looked up from the desk she was wiping to see a group of young professionals approaching. They moved with the casual confidence of people who had never doubted their place in the world. The leader of the group was a man in his late 20s, tall and lean with the kind of aggressive handsomeness that probably opened doors for him. His suit was expensive, but worn with studied casualness, the jacket unbuttoned, the tie loosened just enough to suggest he was too important to worry about formality. His dark hair was perfectly styled in that effortlessly messy way that took considerable effort to achieve. This was Derek Manning, though Maria wouldn't learn his name until later. Right now, he was just another entitled voice demanding her attention. Are you listening? Derek asked, his tone suggesting he'd been talking to her for longer than she'd realized. I'm sorry, sir. What did you need? Derek's friends, 2 other young men and a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, exchanged glances and barely suppressed smirks. I said, you need to be more careful around the desks. Some of us have important work here, and we can't have you messing with our stuff. Maria felt her face flush. She'd been meticulous about not disturbing anything on the desks, following Jennifer Walsh's instructions to the letter. Of course, sir. I'm very careful not to touch any documents or personal items, are you? Derek's voice carried that particular tone of disbelief that suggested she was lying simply by virtue of who she was. Because it looks like you moved some papers on Jenkins' desk over there. Maria glanced at the desk in question. She had dusted around a neat stack of papers, being careful not to disturb them. I didn't move anything, sir. I just dusted around, don't argue with me, Derek cut her off, his voice sharp enough to draw attention from other parts of the office. I'm telling you what I saw. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Maria could feel eyes on her from across the room, other employees slowing their work, sensing drama. She wanted to defend herself, to explain. But she could see in Derek's face that it wouldn't matter. He'd already decided what kind of person she was. You're right, sir, she said quietly. I'll be more careful. Derek's smile was triumphant. Good. See that you are. As the group walked away, Maria heard their voices drop to what they probably thought were whispers. God, they're all the same, aren't they? The fashionable woman said. No accountability whatsoever. What do you expect? Derek replied. Half of them probably don't even speak English properly. I heard she doesn't even have papers. One of the other men added. My cousin works at Inns. Says they're cracking down on companies that hire illegals for cleaning crews. The laughter that followed felt like acid in Maria's ears. She bent over her cleaning supplies, pretending to organize them while she waited for the burning in her chest to subside. If they only knew, she thought, if they had any idea who they were talking to, what she'd accomplished, what she was capable of. But that was the point, wasn't it? They saw only what they expected to see, a brown woman in a gray uniform, someone whose story didn't matter, whose dignity was negotiable. The evening wore on, and the comments continued. They weren't always directed at her. Sometimes she was just the subject of conversation, as if she couldn't hear them or wouldn't understand. I bet she sends half her paycheck back to Mexico, she heard someone say during a break room conversation. If she's even legal, came the response. You know how these cleaning companies are. My neighbor hired one of them to clean her house once. Had to count the silverware after she left. Each comment was like a small cut, not deep enough to be fatal but persistent enough to wear her down. Maria had dealt with prejudice her entire life, growing up in San Antonio, working her way through community college, building her career in corporate America, but there was something particularly brutal about this casual cruelty. These people felt comfortable saying things in front of her that they'd never say directly to her face, as if her uniform made her somehow less than human. By 8 p.m., most of the office had cleared out. The quiet was almost worse than the comments. It gave her too much time to think, to replay the evening's humiliations, to question whether she could really do this for 3 more months. She was emptying a trash can near the executive offices when she heard footsteps approaching. Derek Manning had returned, apparently having forgotten something at his desk. He was on his phone, talking loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. No, you should have seen it, he was saying, clearly entertaining whoever was on the other end of the call. This cleaning lady. I swear she looked like she was about to start crying when I called her out for moving stuff around. These people are so sensitive. Maria kept working, hoping he'd retrieve whatever he'd forgotten and leave. But Derek seemed to be enjoying his story too much to hurry. Oh, it gets better, he continued. She's got this whole victim thing going on. Probably practices her sob story in the mirror every morning. Please don't deport me. I just want to clean your toilets. His laughter was loud and cruel, echoing off the marble walls. Maria's hands stilled on the trash can, and she felt something shift inside her chest, a cold, hard anger that was different from the burning humiliation she'd been carrying all evening. You know what the best part is? Derek went on, apparently oblivious to her presence just a few feet away. She probably thinks this is the best job she'll ever have, like this is her big break or something. God, can you imagine being that pathetic? That was when Maria made her mistake. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the stress of the past months, or just the simple human need to be seen as more than a uniform. Whatever it was, she turned to look at Derek, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. For just a moment, the careful blankness she maintained on her face was replaced by something else: intelligence, anger, and a kind of authority that had nothing to do with cleaning supplies or gray uniforms. Derek caught the look and stopped mid-sentence. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other across the empty office, and Maria saw confusion flicker across his face. It was as if he'd suddenly realized that there was a person behind the uniform, And that person was looking at him with the kind of steady assessment that made him uncomfortable. Then the moment passed. Derek's confusion transformed into irritation, as if Maria had somehow been inappropriate by looking at him like an equal. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice cold. Maria forced her expression back to neutral. "No, sir. Just finishing up the trash." "Good," Derek said, but there was something different in his tone now, a slight edge that suggested he'd been unsettled by what he'd seen in her eyes. "Make sure you do." He grabbed a file from his desk and left without another word, but Maria could feel him glancing back at her as he walked away. The rest of the evening passed without incident. Maria finished her rounds methodically, cleaning each surface with the same careful attention to detail that had marked her entire career. But the encounter with Derek had shaken something loose inside her, and she found herself thinking about things she'd tried to put aside. 3 months, that's all she had to do. 3 months of this, and then Sophia would graduate and everything would change. But as she pushed her cart toward the service elevator at the end of her shift, Maria wondered if she was strong enough to maintain the pretense for that long. The elevator doors were just closing when she heard the crash. Maria had been reaching for the button when her elbow caught the edge of a crystal award that someone had left precariously close to the edge of a reception desk. She watched in horror as the heavy piece tumbled to the floor, shattering into dozens of gleaming fragments. And that's where our story began, with Maria standing in that pristine hallway, staring down at the broken crystal and feeling like it was somehow symbolic of everything that had gone wrong in her life. But as she knelt to carefully collect the pieces, being mindful of the sharp edges, Maria made a decision. She wouldn't let them break her the way they'd broken this award. She was stronger than they knew, more resilient than they imagined. They saw only what they wanted to see. A cleaning lady in a gray uniform, someone beneath their notice except as an object of ridicule. They had no idea that the woman kneeling on their marble floor had survived things that would have destroyed them, had built something from nothing, had raised a daughter who would soon be changing the world. They had no idea who they were really dealing with, but they were about to find out. As Maria swept up the last of the crystal fragments, she made herself a promise. She would endure their mockery, their casual cruelty, their dismissive assumptions. She would wear their uniform and clean their offices and empty their trash. She would be invisible when they needed her to be invisible. But she would also remember everything, every slight, every cruel comment, every moment of humiliation. She would remember their names and their faces and their careless arrogance. Because Maria Elena Rodriguez hadn't gotten where she was by backing down from a fight. And although they didn't know it yet, they had just picked a fight with the wrong woman. The broken crystal was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new humiliations, new tests of her resolve. Derek Manning would return with his cruel jokes and his casual prejudice. Jennifer Walsh would continue to treat her like a potential threat to their precious secrets. The young professionals would keep making their snide comments about her appearance, her background, her worth as a human being. But Maria would endure it all, because she had something they didn't understand, a purpose beyond their comprehension, a strength forged in fires they couldn't imagine, and a plan they couldn't possibly see coming. She disposed of the crystal fragments and finished her shift in silence, her mind already working on what tomorrow would bring. As she changed out of her uniform in the building's service bathroom, she caught sight of herself in the mirror again. The woman looking back at her was tired, stressed, and hurting, but she was far from defeated. 3 months, she whispered to her reflection. You can do anything for 3 months. But even as she said it, Maria knew that 3 months might be too long. Not because she couldn't endure the work or the humiliation, but because maintaining this deception was harder than she'd anticipated. Every day she wore this uniform was a day she wasn't being herself, and that was taking a toll she hadn't expected. The question wasn't whether she could last 3 months. The question was whether she could keep her true identity hidden that long, or whether the mask would slip at the worst possible moment. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave the building, Maria had no idea that tomorrow would bring a confrontation that would test every ounce of her self-control. She had no idea that Derek Manning was planning something that would push her to her absolute limit, and she certainly had no idea that in less than 24 hours, everything would change. The sports car was already waiting in her garage at home, covered by a tarp and ready for the moment when she would need it. But that moment felt very far away as she walked to her modest Honda Civic. Just another tired worker heading home after a long day. Tomorrow, she would return to Meridian Financial Group and put on the gray uniform again. She would push her cleaning cart through those marble hallways and endure whatever new cruelties they had in store for her. But tomorrow, she would also be one day closer to revealing the truth. And when that moment came, when she finally showed them exactly who they'd been mocking, the shock on their faces would make every moment of tonight's humiliation worth it. Maria drove home through the quiet city streets, already planning for tomorrow. She had no idea that Derek Manning was also making plans, plotting something that would force her hand much sooner than she'd anticipated. The game was just beginning, and neither side knew what the other was truly capable of. But they were about to find out. The sleek black Porsche 911 Turbo S cut through the morning traffic like a knife through silk, its engine purring with the kind of restrained power that spoke of German engineering and unlimited resources. Behind the wheel, Maria Elena Rodriguez checked her Patek Philippe watch, a gift to herself after winning her first $1 million settlement, and allowed herself a small smile that it was 10:43 a.m. and she was exactly 2 minutes ahead of schedule. But let me back up, because you need to understand what had happened in the 16 hours since Maria swept up that broken crystal and made her silent promise. You need to know about the phone call that changed everything, the decision that would expose the truth, and the plan that was about to unfold in the marble halls of Meridian Financial Group. Maria had barely walked through the door of her modest 2-bedroom apartment when her phone rang. She was still wearing her cleaning uniform, still carrying the weight of the evening's humiliations. When she saw Sophia's name on the caller ID, Mija, she answered, immediately alert. Sophia never called this late unless something was wrong, Mom. Her daughter's voice was tight with a mixture of excitement and barely controlled fury. I need to tell you something, and you're not going to believe it. Maria sank into her worn leather armchair, one of the few expensive pieces in her deliberately modest apartment. What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine. But Sophia paused, and Maria could hear papers rustling in the background. Mom, do you remember me telling you about my internship research project? The one on workplace discrimination in corporate environments, of course. Maria had been proud when Sophia landed the research position with Professor Martinez, one of the state's leading experts on employment law. The project was part of Sophia's preparation for her thesis on systemic discrimination in white-collar workplaces. Well, I've been analyzing data from discrimination complaints filed with the state labor board over the past 5 years, looking for patterns, companies that show up repeatedly, that kind of thing. Maria frowned. Okay, Mom. Meridian Financial Group has been named in 17 separate complaints. In the past 3 years, 17. That's not including the ones that were settled privately or never reported. The name hit Maria like a physical blow. What kind of complaints? Everything. Racial discrimination, sexual harassment, wage theft from contracted workers, retaliation against employees who complained about working conditions. But here's the thing that made me call you. Sophia's voice dropped. 3 of those complaints were specifically about how they treat their cleaning staff. Verbal abuse, deliberately creating messes for them to clean up, making them work in unsafe conditions, refusing to provide basic equipment. Maria's grip tightened on the phone. Sophia, one complaint was from a woman named Carmen Gutierrez. She worked there for 6 months before she couldn't take it anymore. She said a group of employees would deliberately spill things and make messes just to humiliate the cleaning staff. She said they would make jokes about deportation, about her immigration status, about her intelligence. She said they treated her like she wasn't even human. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Sophia knew her mother well enough to recognize the particular quality of her silence when she was processing something important. Mom, Sophia said carefully, you didn't take that job at some random office building, did you? Maria closed her eyes. Her brilliant daughter, always 2 steps ahead, always seeing the connections others missed. Sophia, you're working at Meridian Financial Group. It wasn't a question. The same company I've been researching. The same company that has a documented history of abusing people exactly like. Oh my God, Mom. What have you been doing? Maria felt the weight of the deception she'd been carrying. The careful lies she'd told to protect her daughter from worrying. I needed the money, Mija. For your final semester. It was just supposed to be 3 months. And then 3 months of letting them treat you like garbage. Sophia's voice cracked with emotion. 3 months of enduring the same abuse that drove Carmen Gutierrez to quit. Mom, do you have any idea what these people are capable of? I can handle it, Maria said quietly. No. Sophia's voice was firm, with an edge of steel that reminded Maria exactly whose daughter she was. No, you can't just handle it. Not anymore. What do you mean? I mean it's time to stop hiding who you are. It's time to show them exactly who they've been messing with. Maria felt something shift in her chest, a familiar sensation she recognized from her courtroom days. The moment when she stopped playing defense and went on the attack. Sophia, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that Meridian Financial Group has been getting away with this behavior for years because no one with the power to stop them has been paying attention. I'm thinking that they've created a hostile work environment that violates about 15 different federal and state laws. And I'm thinking that my mother, the most brilliant attorney I know, has been gathering evidence from the inside without even realizing it. The idea took shape between them in the silence that followed. Audacious and perfect and absolutely terrifying. You want me to blow my cover, Maria said slowly. I want you to walk into that building tomorrow morning as yourself, not as Maria, the cleaning lady, but as Maria Rodriguez, senior partner at Rodriguez and Associates. I want you to show them exactly what happens when they underestimate the wrong person. Maria's mind was already racing, thinking through the possibilities, the risks, the potential outcomes. It would have to be handled carefully, strategically. We'd need documentation, witnesses, a clear legal framework. Mom, Sophia's voice was gentle now, proud. I've been building that framework for months. Every complaint, every pattern, every violation, it's all documented. All we need is someone on the inside who can testify to the ongoing behavior. Someone like me, someone exactly like you. They talked for another hour, refining the plan, discussing strategy, preparing for what would happen next. When Maria finally hung up, she felt like she was waking up from a long dream. For months, she'd been playing a role, hiding who she was, accepting treatment that she would never have tolerated in any other context. But tomorrow, that would end. Tomorrow, she would walk into Meridian Financial Group as herself. Maria slept better that night than she had in months. For the first time since taking the cleaning job, she felt like herself again. Not the diminished version she'd been playing, but the woman who had built a successful law practice from nothing, who had never backed down from a fight, who had raised a daughter destined to change the world. She woke at 5 a.m., not because she had to be at work early, but because she had preparations to make. The first stop was her walk-in closet, where her real wardrobe waited behind the modest clothes she'd been wearing to maintain her cover. She selected a charcoal gray suit from Armani, beautifully tailored, quietly expensive, designed to command respect without being flashy. The kind of suit that said successful professional in a language that people like Derek Manning understood instinctively. Her shoes were Italian leather. Her briefcase was handcrafted, and her jewelry was minimal but clearly expensive. Everything about her appearance would send a message before she spoke a single word. But the most important preparation wasn't what she put on, it was what she took off. The mask of deference, the careful blankness of expression, the habit of making herself smaller to avoid confrontation. All of that was stripped away as she looked at herself in the mirror and saw the woman she'd always been underneath the gray uniform. Maria Elena Rodriguez, Juris Doctor from the University of Texas School of Law, senior partner at Rodriguez and Associates, specializing in employment discrimination and civil rights law, winner of the State Bar Association's Outstanding Achievement Award 3 years running, the woman who had taken on Fortune 500 companies and won, who had secured millions in settlements for workers who had been abused by their employers. who had never lost a discrimination case that went to trial, the woman who was about to make Meridian Financial Group very, very sorry they had underestimated her. At 10:30 a.m., Maria Rodriguez, the real Maria Rodriguez, pulled her Porsche into the visitor parking space directly in front of Meridian Financial Group's main entrance. She didn't use the employee parking garage, didn't sneak in through the service entrance, didn't carry a cleaning cart or wear a gray uniform. She walked through the front doors like she owned the building. The transformation was complete and utterly shocking. The woman who entered the marble lobby bore no resemblance to the tired cleaning lady from the night before. This woman moved with authority, carried herself with confidence, and radiated the kind of professional competence that made people instinctively step aside. Bill, the security guard who had barely looked at her the previous evening, did a literal double-take as she approached his desk. "Good morning," Maria said, her voice clear and commanding. "I'm Maria Rodriguez with Rodriguez and Associates. I have a 10:45 appointment with Mr. Pemberton." Bill's eyes widened as recognition dawned. Weren't you? Didn't I see you last night?" "Yes, you did." Maria's smile was polite, but contained an edge that made Bill's hand shake slightly as he reached for the visitor log. "I was conducting an investigation into workplace conditions here. Thank you for your cooperation." The elevator ride to the executive floor gave Maria a moment to center herself, to prepare for what was about to happen. She'd been in situations like this before, walking into hostile territory, facing down opponents who thought they held all the cards, but this felt different. This was personal in a way that her other cases had never been. The elevator doors opened onto the same floor, where she'd been humiliated just hours before. But everything looked different now, smaller, somehow, less intimidating. The marble halls that had seemed so imposing when she was pushing a cleaning cart now looked like exactly what they were: expensive decoration designed to impress people who were easily impressed. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, who had watched Derek's performance the night before, without saying a word, looked up as Maria approached. Her perfectly practiced smile faltered as she tried to process what she was seeing. "Good morning," Maria said pleasantly. "I'm here to see Mr. Pemberton. Do you have an appointment?" Ashley stammered, clearly struggling to reconcile the woman in front of her with the cleaning lady she'd seen being humiliated just hours before. "I do. Maria Rodriguez and Associates." Ashley's fingers trembled slightly as she typed into her computer. I'll let him know you're here." While Ashley made the call, Maria allowed herself to look around the reception area with new eyes. She noticed things she'd missed while focused on her cleaning duties. The expensive artwork that was probably purchased specifically to intimidate visitors. The arrangement of furniture designed to make guests feel small and dependent. The subtle displays of wealth and power that were meant to establish hierarchy. Before any words were exchanged, it was all very impressive. If you were the kind of person who was meant to be impressed, Maria was not that kind of person. "Mr. Pemberton will see you now," Ashley said, her voice still uncertain. "His office is—" "I know where it is," Maria said calmly. "Thank you." She walked through the open office area with the same measured pace she used in courtrooms, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. Conversations stopped as she passed. Heads turned. Whispers started, and there, near the water cooler where he'd been holding court with his usual crowd of sycophants, was Derek Manning. Their eyes met across the office space, and Maria watched as recognition dawned on his face. She saw the exact moment when his brain processed what he was seeing. The cleaning lady from last night, but not the cleaning lady at all. Someone else entirely. Someone whose presence here made no sense according to his understanding of the world. Someone who was looking at him with the calm, steady gaze of a predator who had just spotted her prey. Maria didn't break stride, didn't acknowledge him with more than that single, devastating look. But she could feel his confusion, his growing panic, as she continued toward Pemberton's office. Behind her, she heard his voice, tight with something that might have been fear. "What the hell?" The words carried across the suddenly quiet office space, drawing even more attention to the unfolding drama. Maria smiled slightly and kept walking, James Pemberton was a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room. At 62, he had the kind of distinguished appearance that came from a lifetime of good nutrition, expensive health care, and the confidence that money could solve any problem. His corner office was a shrine to his own success, awards, photographs with politicians and celebrities, expensive furniture arranged to make visitors feel small and supplicant. He was not prepared for Maria Rodriguez. She entered his office like she belonged there, took the chair across from his desk without being invited, and looked at him with the kind of direct, assessing gaze that made powerful men uncomfortable. "Mr. Pemberton," she said pleasantly, "thank you for agreeing to see me on such short notice." Pemberton's smile was cautious, uncertain. He was clearly struggling to understand what was happening, why this woman seemed familiar, why her presence in his office felt somehow threatening. "Ms. Rodriguez, isn't it? I have to admit, I'm not sure why you're here. My assistant said you're with a law firm, but Rodriguez and Associates," Maria confirmed. "We specialize in employment discrimination and civil rights violations. I'm here because we've been investigating your company's treatment of contracted workers, specifically your cleaning staff." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Pemberton's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by the wary expression of a man who suddenly realized he might be in serious trouble. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said carefully. Maria opened her briefcase and removed a manila folder thick with documents. "Mr. Pemberton, over the past 3 years, your company has been named in 17 separate complaints filed with the State Labor Board. The complaints allege a pattern of discriminatory behavior, harassment, and abuse directed at workers who are primarily Hispanic, primarily female, and primarily employed by contracted service companies." She placed the folder on his desk and opened it, revealing complaint forms, witness statements, and documentation that painted a clear picture of systemic abuse. The most recent complaint was filed by Carmen Gutierrez, who worked here for 6 months before the hostile work environment became unbearable. She alleged that your employees engaged in deliberate harassment, including verbal abuse, deliberately creating messes for cleaning staff to address, and making threatening comments about immigration status. Pemberton's face had gone pale. "Ms. Rodriguez, I can assure you that Meridian Financial Group has strict policies against any form of discrimination or harassment. If there were isolated incidents, isolated." Maria's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "Mr. Pemberton, 17 complaints in 3 years is not isolated. It's a pattern. It's a culture. And as of last night, I have first-hand evidence that the behavior described in these complaints is ongoing." That's when understanding finally dawned in Pemberton's eyes. The recognition that had been nagging at him since she walked in suddenly crystallized, and Maria watched as he realized exactly who he was talking to. "You're the cleaning lady," he whispered. "I'm the attorney who spent last evening documenting the hostile work environment that your employees have created," Maria corrected. "I witnessed verbal harassment, discriminatory comments, and deliberate humiliation directed at workers whose only crime was trying to earn an honest living." She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Everything from last night is documented, Mr. Pemberton. Every cruel comment, every casual slur, every moment of deliberate humiliation. It's all here, and it's all admissible in court." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Pemberton's heavy breathing. Maria could see him struggling to process the magnitude of what had just happened, the realization that his company, his carefully constructed world of privilege and power, was about to come crashing down around him. What do you want?" he finally managed. Maria's smile was sharp as a blade. "Justice, Mr. Pemberton. I want justice for every worker who has been abused in this building. I want accountability for the culture of discrimination that you've allowed to flourish. And I want to make sure that what happened to Carmen Gutierrez and what happened to me last night never happens to anyone else." She stood up, her movements graceful and controlled. "You'll be hearing from my office within the next 48 hours. I suggest you contact your legal department and prepare for what's coming." As she turned to leave, Pemberton found his voice again. "Ms. Rodriguez, wait. Surely we can discuss this." Find some reasonable solution that works for everyone." Maria paused at the door and looked back at him. For just a moment, her professional mask slipped, and Pemberton saw something in her eyes that made him shrink back in his chair. The cold fury of a woman who had been pushed too far, who had endured too much, who was finally in a position to push back. "Mr. Pemberton," she said quietly, "your employees spent last evening mocking me, humiliating me, and treating me like I was less than human. They made jokes about my legal status, my intelligence, and my worth as a person. One of them deliberately created additional work for me just to show his friends how easily he could make me dance to his tune." She stepped back into the room, and Pemberton instinctively pressed himself back in his chair. "I've spent my entire career fighting for people who have been treated the way your employees treated me. Last night, I've secured millions in settlements. I've changed company policies. I've sent executives to prison for creating hostile work environments. But this time it's personal." The promise in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't just business anymore. This was a reckoning. There will be no reasonable solution. "Mr. Pemberton, there will be justice, and your employees are about to learn that the woman they mocked isn't who they thought she was." Maria walked out of Pemberton's office and back into the main work area with the same calm confidence she'd maintained throughout the meeting. But now, everyone was watching. Word had spread through the office with the speed that gossip always travels in closed environments, and by the time she emerged, every conversation had stopped. They were all there, Jennifer Walsh with her perfect makeup and expensive suit, standing frozen near her office door. Ashley the receptionist, her face pale with understanding. The young professionals who had made their cruel comments about her shoes, her status, her worth. And Derek Manning, standing in the center of it all like a deer caught in headlights, his face a mask of confusion and growing terror. Maria walked directly to him. The office fell silent except for the soft click of her heels on the marble floor. Everyone watched as she approached the man who had humiliated her just hours before, who had demanded that she clean his office while his friends laughed at her expense, who had made jokes about her deportation and her intelligence. She stopped, directly in front of him, close enough that he had to look down slightly to meet her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried clearly through the silent office. "Mr. Manning," she said pleasantly, "I wanted to thank you for your cooperation last evening." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No sound came out. "Your behavior provided excellent documentation for the discrimination case I'm building against this company. The recording of your comments about deportation, about my intelligence, about my legal status, it's going to be very compelling evidence in court." She paused, letting that sink in, watching as the color drained from his face. "I also wanted you to know that I've added your name specifically to the complaint. I'm filing with the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee. Creating a hostile work environment isn't just morally reprehensible, Mr. Manning, it's illegal. And given that you're licensed to practice law in this state, it's also a violation of your professional ethical obligations." Derek finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Who are you?" Maria's smile was cold and satisfied. "I'm Maria Elena Rodriguez, senior partner at Rodriguez and Associates. I specialize in employment discrimination cases, and I've never lost a case that went to trial. I'm also the woman you spent last evening treating like garbage, apparently unaware that everything you said and did was being documented by someone with the power to destroy your career." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a business card. Holding it out to him, Derek took it with trembling fingers. "I suggest you contact a very good attorney, Mr. Manning, because you're going to need one." The card was beautiful, heavy stock, elegant typography, embossed with the logo of one of the state's most prestigious law firms. At the bottom, in smaller text, it listed Maria's credentials: J.D. from Ut Law, member of the State Bar Association, recipient of multiple awards for excellence in civil rights litigation. Derek stared at the card like it was a death sentence, which, in many ways, it was. Maria turned to address the rest of the office, her voice carrying to every corner of the space. "For those of you who participated in the harassment I experienced last evening, And you know who you are. You'll be hearing from my office soon. Creating a hostile work environment is a serious matter, and there will be consequences." She looked around the room, making eye contact with each person who had contributed to her humiliation. "I hope the entertainment value was worth it." The exit. Maria walked toward the elevator with the same measured pace she'd maintained throughout the morning. Behind her, she could hear the excited whispers starting, the panicked phone calls being made, the sound of a workplace that had just realized it was in serious trouble. As the elevator doors opened, she turned back one final time to look at Derek Manning. He was still standing where she'd left him, still holding her business card, still trying to process what had just happened to his world. "Oh, and Mr. Manning," she called across the office, "next time you want to make assumptions about someone based on their uniform, you might want to make sure you know who you're talking to first." The elevator doors closed on a room full of people who had just learned the most expensive lesson of their careers. As Maria rode down to the lobby, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. For months, she'd been someone else, smaller, quieter, more careful. She'd accepted treatment that she would never have tolerated in any other context, all in service of a deception that had been eating away at her dignity piece by piece. But now, she was herself again, the woman who had built a successful practice from nothing, who had never backed down from a fight, who had raised a daughter destined to change the world, the woman who was about to make sure that what happened to her would never happen to anyone else. Her phone was already ringing as she reached the lobby, Sophia's name on the caller ID. "Mom?" Her daughter's voice was tight with anticipation. "How did it go?" Maria pushed through the building's front doors and into the bright morning sunlight, feeling like she was emerging from a cave. "It went perfectly, Mija," she said, a smile spreading across her face for the first time in months. "They have no idea what's about to hit them." The Porsche started with a purr, and Maria pulled away from the curb with the satisfaction of a job well done. In her rearview mirror, she could see faces pressed against the windows of Meridian Financial Group, watching her leave. They were probably wondering who she really was, how they'd been so completely fooled. What was going to happen next? They wouldn't have to wonder long. Within 48 hours, Rodriguez and Associates would file a comprehensive lawsuit against Meridian Financial Group, alleging systematic discrimination, harassment, and the creation of a hostile work environment. The case would include testimony from 17 previous complainants, documentation of ongoing abusive behavior, and recorded evidence of harassment directed at contracted workers. Derek Manning would be named specifically in the complaint, both as an individual defendant and as evidence of the company's pattern of discriminatory behavior. His professional license would be reviewed by the State Bar Association, and his career in law would effectively be over before his 30th birthday. Jennifer Walsh and several other employees would face disciplinary action, sensitivity training, and the kind of professional scrutiny that would follow them for the rest of their careers. And James Pemberton would discover that settling out of court, which he desperately wanted to do, wasn't an option when the plaintiff was more interested in justice than money. But all of that was still to come right now. Maria was just a woman driving through the city in her sports car, feeling like herself again for the first time in months. Her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she didn't recognize. "Rodriguez and Associates," she answered. Professionally, "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Carmen Gutierrez. I heard what happened at Meridian Financial Group today. Someone there called me. Said you mentioned my case." Maria smiled. "Ms. Gutierrez, I was hoping you'd call. I think it's time we had a conversation about justice." "I thought I was alone," Carmen said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought no one would believe me, that I was just some cleaning lady whose word didn't matter." "You were never alone," Maria said firmly, "and your word matters more than you know. Would you be willing to testify about what happened to you there?" "Yes," Carmen said without hesitation. "Yes, I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else." As Maria drove home, her phone continued to ring. Word was spreading through the network of contracted workers, cleaning staff, and service employees who had endured similar treatment at companies throughout the city. They'd heard about the woman who had fought back, who had turned the tables, on her tormentors, who had proven that they weren't powerless after all. By the time she pulled into her driveway, Maria had agreed to represent 12 additional plaintiffs in what would become the largest employment discrimination case in the state's history. The cleaning lady uniform was folded neatly in her closet, preserved as evidence. She would never wear it again, but she would never forget what it had taught her about the casual cruelty that flourished in environments where people felt safe to show their worst impulses. She'd learned that dignity wasn't something that could be taken away by a uniform or a job title. It was something that came from within, something that survived even when everything else was stripped away. And she'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people reveal exactly who they are when they think no one important is watching, because someone is always watching. Someone who might have more power than they realize. Someone who might be planning to use that power for justice. The sports car sat in the driveway, engine cooling in the afternoon sun. Inside the house, Maria Rodriguez, the real Maria Rodriguez, began preparing for the fight of her career, a fight she fully intended to win. Did this story give you chills? Can you believe the incredible transformation and the justice that followed? Comment below and tell me what you thought of Derek's reaction when he realized who he'd been messing with. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more incredible tales of justice prevailing, and share this with everyone who needs to remember that we should never judge people by their appearance. You never know who might be listening, watching, and planning their response. What other stories of hidden identity and sweet justice would you like to see? Let me know in the comments.